Hey everybody, I went way back in the Dave Ramsey archives to find a video that I think highlights my point about paying off your mortgage. A lot of commenters have been saying that, in a lot of cases, people just don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Dave Ramsey's responses are for people who are having a hard time. They shouldn't be taken as like the final answer on everything finances. It's just for this specific group of people. And while I don't discredit that, I think that if you have a hard time paying off debt, staying out of debt is a great idea. And in fact, if you could pay off your house and you could stay out of debt, I think you're doing great. Don't get me wrong. This guy who called, I think even Dave Ramsey understands that. This guy is not in the category of people he normally talks to, so he almost talks past him and answers the question as if the person's not in the situation he's in. I think it's really interesting, so let's take a look.
John's with us in Chicago. Hey, John, welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure. What's up?
Got a question. I have been able to save up quite a bit, a decent stash of savings, and the only debt I have is a mortgage. I've always been an avid investor, and I was lucky enough to get locked in at a low rate, about 3.25%. So just curious your thoughts, having a different...
So quickly, let's break this down. I don't think this guy's calling because he wants Dave Ramsey's opinion. He says he's an avid investor. So if you remember, I say things like, hey, if you are able to invest, save a lot over time, you don't get into consumer debt, my advice is probably better for you than Dave Ramsey's advice. And he falls into that category. He said he saved quite a bit of money. His mortgage is locked in at a low rate, 3.25, 3.25. So it's less than 4, like what we talk about here. So he's sitting in a pretty good position. Not only that, he doesn't know this yet because this video is 3 years old. The rates are about to drop significantly. He could refinance and save bucket tons of money, getting somewhere closer to a 2% rate. And he doesn't know that that's coming yet. So if he just waits this out, he's going to be sitting in a really good position. And I think he knows that, but let's keep going.
I'm convincing myself to pay off my mortgage with such a low rate.
How much do you owe on your mortgage?
About $180.
Okay. And how much is the non-retirement nest egg?
About $90.
Okay.
So he's got a retirement. So Dave Ramsey's not going to tell him to take money out of his retirement. That's a good idea. Major tax burdens as a result of that. But he's sitting on about $90,000. So not enough to pay off this loan, but $90,000 that he could invest. He's just sitting on in cash. We're going to get to that in a bit.
And so you don't have enough to pay it off?
Correct. So I've been trying to decide, does it make sense to just throw that chunk at that?
Okay, I got you. Okay, even though it doesn't pay it off. Okay, and what's the home worth?
About $520.
Good. Okay, and how much do you have in retirement?
Right, so he's sitting on a debt to asset ratio of about 37%, which means that the market would have to drop over 63% for him to be in a position where he would be upside down on his home. That's never happened in human history. That didn't even happen in 2008. So he's sitting in a really good place.
401k of about $150. IRA and Roth of about $100.
Okay, how old are you?
35.
Okay, good. You got a great start. What do you make a year? Household income?
Household income is $140.
Oh, great. Yeah, you're in great shape. You're doing great.
All right, so let's add this up. So his net worth is sitting around $670-ish thousand. Pretty good. At 35 years old, pretty good.
Okay. Well, here's what we teach, and then more importantly, why we teach it. Okay. What we teach is a thing called the baby steps, where you're debt-free, everything but the house.
So this is what I was talking about. I'm going to talk right past this question. Here you go.
And have an emergency fund. That's 1, 2, and 3. You've done that. Then we suggest at baby step 4 that you start investing in retirement, 15% of your household income. Are you doing that?
I am, yeah.
So you got $25,000 going into retirement accounts a year, $2,000 a month.
Yeah, but 10% in my 401k, and then about another 10% just goes into savings.
Okay, but it's not going into retirement.
Also is Roth.
Well, yeah, 10% going into the 401k.
Okay.
That's retired.
So we suggest, I'm just trying to clarify where you were on what we teach, and then I'll go back to why.
Sure.
Okay. So 15% of your income going into retirement is what we would recommend. And so that would mean you would put 10% in your 401k and 5% more into Roth IRAs in good mutual funds. And in your 401k, you'd be in good mutual funds. That's baby step 4. 5 is kids' college. Do you have kids?
I do.
And you need to save for their college, right?
Right.
Is there something independent of what we've talked about that's covering that I don't know about?
I do have 529 plans.
How much is in those?
About 75 between the two of them.
And they're how old are kids?
5 and 8.
Okay, so you got a really...
This dude has $75,000 for a 5 and 8-year-old for college. I mean, this guy's so far ahead of like 99.9% of everybody, and he's like a million times more ahead than everyone who calls Dave Ramsey, right? So for the college thing, I struggle on this one a little bit. The reason is because when you start investing in a college fund, you do get some tax benefits as a result, but that money becomes available to the student. There are parent-controlled ones, but mostly they become available to the student, and they can use them on very specific things. The parent-controlled ones are the same, and you can use them on very specific things. But if you don't use them on those things, you try to get your money back, you get taxed on it pretty heavily. So I'm of the mindset, and I also have other opinions on college, and I've covered them before, that they don't always produce the best results. There's a lot of other answers. So I would rather just invest extra money instead of putting it into a college fund specifically, but I'll talk about that at a different time.
Good start there. Good. So we can kind of check that box, and you just keep adding. You've been adding systematically to that, it sounds like, and you'd keep doing that. 6 is pay off the house early. So above 15% going into retirement and above kids' college check, we would say throw everything at the house, which is the $90,000 that's in discussion here, unless you don't have an emergency fund. If you don't, we'd use some of the $90,000 for that and throw the rest at the mortgage. Why would I do that? Okay, and the reason is very simple. As we've studied millionaires over the last 25 years, and we just completed the largest study of millionaires ever done, over 10,000 of them, we find, to start with, that somewhere in the neighborhood, 79% inherited nothing, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% inherited not enough to make them millionaires. So 90% of millionaires, in other words, are not millionaires because of inherited money, but because of their habits and what they do with their money. And the two primary things
That's not totally relevant to this guy's case, but I think that's pretty cool. Not going to knock that one. Most people who make wealth don't get it because their parents gave it to them. Generational wealth is not as common, I think, as everyone thinks it is. Most people that do well off because they figured out how to do things. They've learned the system. They know how to invest, and they become successful at it. So I think that's pretty cool.
We see that those habits that cause them to be successful, meaning hitting $1 million net worth and above, is the primary initial levels of wealth. The first million or 2 million is 401k and a paid-for house.
401k and a paid-for house. We talked about this before. I have a problem with including your house in this number, and I want to know the data when you don't include the house. We'll get more to that because he's going to cover a little bit more. But
now, the paid-for house not only is going up in value and stabilizes, but we do not find them saying, I'm going to borrow as much 3.5% money as I can borrow because I can invest it and make a better rate of return. We do not find them doing that.
But he didn't study that. What he looked at is, do people in their retirement who are millionaires, because most millionaires are old people, because that's what it takes. It takes a long period of time. You have to invest over time, and eventually you get to $1 million. So then he asked them, do you have a paid-for home? Well, if I didn't pay off my debts that were under 4%, and I invested like crazy, and then I get to retirement, and let's say I just go buy a $2 million house for cash, right? I'd fall under Dave Ramsey's plan here, and I would count as having a paid-for home, but I didn't really follow his plan to get there, right? And then furthermore, if you were to just pay your house off as slowly as humanly possible, by the time you hit retirement, your house is paid off, you now own your entire house, and again, you don't fall into Dave Ramsey's plan here. So if you buy a house in your late 20s, 30s, early 40s, and then Dave Ramsey's calling you when you're a millionaire at 60, 70 years old, and your house is paid off, well, that's expected. And he's not asking them, like, okay, well, did you pay off your home early? That wasn't part of the Millionaire study. So, again, he's kind of playing with data here to make a point that I don't think exists.
We find them getting the house paid off and using the increased cash flow of not having a house payment to then go bananas on their investing, and their 401ks and non-401k investing starts to go through the roof. But if we fast forward your situation like 5 to 7 years, and you're sitting in this house, by then it's worth $700, and by then you'd have $500 in your 401ks, probably $700 in your 401ks. You'd have about $1.5 million net worth, $1.7 million net worth, of which $700,000 is your house. You would be typical in the case study that we've done. You'd be a typical case study of the representative statistically of the typical millionaire. If, however, you didn't pay off the house, you might still reach millionaire status, but you would be very unusual among that group. So the data points tell us that the...
Yeah, but he wouldn't. Maybe in 10 years he'd be unusual, but he's eventually going to pay this house off. So he's not going to be unusual. He's going to sit in that category, except for that, if you heard what he just said, you would be sitting on 1.5 million net worth, 1.6 million net worth, most of which is your house. And again, we're going to talk about why that's an issue.
Millionaires are paying off their house. Now, why would they do that? Because of risk. Because 100% of the foreclosures occur on a house with a mortgage. And when you have zero mortgage and you walk in the backyard and the grass feels different under your feet,
that's not true either. Foreclosures can also happen because of lack of tax payments. That's not as common. I get that tax payments are less than what the mortgage is, but you're paying tax payments for the rest of your life in most of the states in America. So you always are going to have some sort of house payment. And if you don't pay that, the IRS is going to come take your home.
It's mine, by God, kind of thing. It changes the way you operate the rest of your money because you're standing on such a more solid foundation to live your life. A lot of people change jobs because they're no longer worried about losing something. They were in a job they hated just to pay bills. They change careers. They take a little bit of more calculated risk or something, and we see their incomes go up overall. And so it's more than just a 3.5% mortgage versus mutual funds return. There's risk.
What he's talking about here is financial independence. He's not talking about being debt-free. We've talked about this before. Dave Ramsey almost understands it, that financial independence is the most important thing, and he even says things related to that, like you could switch jobs. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. People start making more money because they are passionate about what they do, and they don't feel like they're handcuffed. Well, yeah, you could get that way by not having as much debt, and I'm sure a lot of people are successful at that. But that's not the only way to financial independence.
There's life in there, there's stability in there, and that's why we're seeing these millionaires do that. So all of that to say, I would pull enough out of your $90,000 if you don't have a separate emergency fund to fund an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. I'd throw the rest of it at that. I would adjust your saving by up 5% into, so you got a total of 15 going into retirement, 5% more going into Roth IRAs and good mutual funds. I think your kid's college is on track. I keep doing that. Throw the rest of it at the mortgage, and then anything else you find in your budget that you were saving above that 15%, I'd throw it at that mortgage till that mortgage is gone. I think your mortgage will be gone in about 3 years, and you would never borrow on a paid-for home to invest, and so you wouldn't keep a mortgage. Hey, good question. Thanks for letting me walk through it with you.
So let's talk about why I don't include your home. Here's the problem with including your home in your retirement plan. It's nice if you have a home that's paid off because that means less expenses in your retirement. So people say like you need like 15 to 20% less in retirement than you do while you're working. You don't have to if you're living off of $100,000 now, you really only need like $75,000 to $80,000 in retirement because you don't have that. You're not going to have that mortgage. You're not going to have some of those expenses. But the house that you live in costs you money. It does not matter how much that house is worth because you can't get the cash out of that home. If you have a $2 million home or a $20,000 home, you're going to have to replace roofs. You're going to have to repair water heaters. You're going to have to fix anything that falls apart and then you're going to have to pay taxes on that property. If your home is worth more, you're going to end up paying more. The repairs are going to be more, taxes are going to be more. That is taking dollar bills out of your pocket at retirement instead of providing you some sort of income. We use something called the 4% rule. It's called from the Trinity study. And what it says is if you include all your investments except for your home, because your home does not produce you actual cash that you can use, then you could take about 4% of that, and that is the amount of money that you could live on into your entire retirement, at least a 30-year period, if not more. So let's do a little bit of math. So let's say most people, the average household income is just over $60,000. So let's take $60,000 and let's take away a house payment. You no longer have to pay for your house, so we'll reduce this by 15%. You know what, just to be even on the more conservative side, we'll reduce it by 25%. So that leaves us with, we need a retirement of at least $45,000 in order to maintain our lifestyle through the rest of our retirement. Now let's multiply that by 25 because we're talking about the 4% rule. It means that whatever number we need to live on, if we multiply it by 25, we will get to the amount of money we have to have invested, not including our home. And you get to $1.125 million. So that's today. If you were to retire right now, you would need $1.125 million. It's going to go up over time because of inflation. You're going to need more money. So 30 years from now, it's probably going to look more like $2-3 million that you're going to need in order to retire. And that's not including your home. When Dave Ramsey's doing these numbers and he's saying like, look, most millionaires, they have a paid for home and they have a 401k. It's not enough data. It's not cutting the people off correctly. And I would really be interested to see how many people are successful in his plan when you don't include their home and they only look at liquid assets or close to liquid assets, cash flowing assets like real estate. I don't mean to be a downer. I know that a lot of people are working hard, but it's a lot easier than you think it is. So this gentleman was 35 years old. He has $90,000 he doesn't know what to do with. How could he put himself and his family into a position of success so that he can feel that financial independence sooner than later? And I have an answer to that. $90,000, his whole let's say he tosses in his whole $90,000 and he doesn't do any more money for the rest of his life. And he puts that in for 30 years because he'll be 65. So it's 35 now, 30 years from now, he'll be 65. And let's say he sticks it in just basic index funds. He's going to be sitting at $1.5 million just by investing that. In fact, how long would it take him to pay off the rest of his? So somewhere between the 6 and 8 year marker, he's going to end up being able to make enough money off of his investments that he could just pay his mortgage off with the interest gained as a result of his investments. So he's going to be in a position where he's more successful than what Dave Ramsey referred to, where Dave Ramsey was saying, hey, in 8 years or so, you're going to be all set. 6 to 8 years, you'll be all set. He could be all set, but he could keep his $90,000 and be all set. Except let's look at if he continues to invest that $2,000 a month, by the time he hits retirement, he's going to be at $5.5 million. That's a huge number that he could retire off of. What's the 4% off of that? We actually can add that into the calculator here. His retirement yearly spending would be $220,000 that he could spend every year for the rest of his retirement comfortably without ever having to worry about his net worth dwindling or running out of money. He would be all set. Because the key here is financial independence. It's not simply like we looked at millionaires and we found that millionaires do X. The goal of a millionaire is fine, but that's not what we're trying to accomplish. It doesn't actually explain what we have to do in order to be successful. What we need to figure out is how much money do you need in retirement to be successful? How do we account for inflation? And then how do we figure out the total amount of net worth you have in order to pay that yearly, retirement salary? And if you look at that total net worth, the question becomes, how do we get there in the long run? Not how do we get there in the short run? How do we figure out the smart financial ways we can do the things we're supposed to do to get to that dollar amount? And if you're not planning that, if you're just investing, you're just paying your home off and you're hoping that you're going to be okay, by the time you're 65, there's a chance that you're working somewhere because you just can't hash the numbers in order to retire. And that would be the most sad thing possible, especially if you're doing everything that you're told you're supposed to be doing. I think this guy is the exact case that we're referring to where he doesn't have consumer debt. He has all the investments he's supposed to have. He has college for his kids, 401k, Roth IRA. He's saving extra on top of that. Obviously, he doesn't have the problem of overspending and then trying to figure out what to do with that money. Like all the commenters are saying that people have a hard time. This guy's not one of those guys. He's sitting there thinking, all right, I'm doing a good job and I'm ready to take it to the next step. And I don't really know what that next step should look like. Where should I put this money? What should I do with it? Should I invest it or should I put it in this mortgage? And he's asking the wrong person because Dave is not talking to him. Dave is talking past him to the people that are struggling with their finances generally. And this guy is not one of those people. So what he should do is he should take that, most of it, I mean, he obviously needs an emergency fund, but he should take most of that money and start investing it into something, whether it be index funds or mutual funds. You should do a little research and find out what he's interested in for the long term. And then he should forget about it. And then he should max out his Roth IRA and continue to invest in this money that he's saving. And by the time he hits retirement, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy could be in a position where he's well worth over $10 million. And then Dave Ramsey be sitting in a position of saying like, okay, well, he's the exception, not the rule. Except for that, that is the rule. That's how stuff works. Mathematically, that's how stuff works. As long as you're smart and you're in it for the long run, you take almost no risk at all in order to get to a position where you can be successful in retirement. So, thanks again for stopping by. I appreciate it. I hope this was enjoyable. Please like and subscribe. Check us out at wealthyidiots.com, including our compound interest calculator, and I'll see you guys next time.